And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports Network. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Kanell, fired up to bring you a full hour of college football conversation as we continue to count down to the beginning of the 2025 season. We are going to roll through and have another draft. This time, we're not talking about quarterbacks. No. Get them out. We are talking about impact players in college football that are not at the quarterback position. We'll be drafting some of our favorites through 4 rounds, talking about the impact positions in college football today. Maybe a win total of the week before we get you out of here. But before we get started with all that, it's rankings season, boys. First, we got the coaches poll on Monday, our very first top 25, and we get to peel it apart. And sure enough, it is the Texas Longhorns narrowly beating out the Ohio State Buckeyes for the number 1 spot. Texas at 1, getting 28 first place votes. Ohio State at 2, getting 20 first place votes. Penn State at 3, getting 14 first place votes. Tom Fornelli, as we look at that, that's the top tier, right? Do you see it in the same way in terms of the battle, the debate for number 1?
Yeah, I think that is one of the bigger storylines heading into the season is that we don't really know who the number 1 team in the country is at this point because every single team that you would consider putting in first place has a question mark surrounding it. Like when you look at Penn State, as far as roster is concerned, that's the one we know the most about because it has the most returning players. It has returning quarterback. It has its running backs. It has most of its defense. It's just they haven't really proven their ability to beat those teams that they're up against. But then you look at Texas and Ohio State, new quarterbacks, new running backs, new receivers, new everybody for the most part. You're just kind of relying on their recruiting classes and the talent. So, yeah, I think it's an accurate reflection of how I personally feel about college football heading into 2025. I don't know who the best team in the country is right now.
Oh my gosh, I'm just bored already. Can we get somebody to think outside the box? You know what this looks like? Every way too early top 25, every top 25 you've seen out there from everybody else that's put it out there. It looked kind of like the Vegas odds that I think a lot of coaches are utilizing now to determine their top 25. I mean, at least some years we get somebody who will put their team, and they're like clearly not a number 1 team, but they'll be like, I believe in them, and they'll put their team at number 1. This is just the latest line of groupthink in the top 25. And if you wanted me to pick apart any one of these, I could, to Tom's point. You could say there's no way that team should be there because of the amount of question marks they have. Or if you really wanted to say, well, Clemson should be number 1 or Penn State should be number 1 because of the amount of returners that they have, including their quarterbacks, you could make that case. That's the part I think that is exciting outside of the groupthink of the top 25 the coaches have, is that you really could make a case and pick apart almost all these teams in the top 10 and say they could be 1, they could be 1, and then you could pick another team and say they don't deserve to be in the top 10. So I think it's fascinating because it does feel wide open, but the groupthink across the board is a little bit boring.
All right, well, let me push back a little, Danny. How big is the group where you think there is a good argument that they should go into the year at first place? You know, Georgia's at 4, Notre Dame at 5, Clemson at 6, Oregon at 7. I mean, you got an Alabama comment for me as well. How big would you draw the circle of teams that have a really good case? Because I'm with Tom. I love this. I love that the first place votes aren't 60 first place votes for one team that we're all down on. The fact that it's 28, 20, 14, that's a debate, that's a discussion, that's a prove it on the field type thing. So how many teams do you think have a real case to be going into this year as the number 1 team in the country?
I think 6 is probably the swath of what I would throw that blanket. Maybe if you went down to Alabama and Oregon, relying on Big Ten champs last year at Oregon and Alabama's kind of historical presence among the top 2 teams once the season ends. But I would say 6 as far as deep as I would go. Notre Dame did play in the national championship last year. Like Marcus Freeman has been a consistent winner. The schedule's pretty easy. So I would say there are 6, which is ironic because no one gave Notre Dame a first place vote out of any of them. But I do think that 6 is probably the lowest I would go to really make a strong case for who could be number 1.
Yeah, I would probably go 8.
Yeah.
I look at that top 10, like honestly, of the 10 teams in that top 10, I think all but the ACC teams are capable of winning a national title. Like I think Clemson being portrayed as a national title contender is probably a bridge too far this year. I think Miami being portrayed as one is probably a bridge too far. But as far as Notre Dame and the SEC and the Big Ten teams that are in that top 10, I think they've all got a legitimate shot at pulling it off. And I think that's just kind of a reflection of the way this sport works right now. Like there's never been a bigger divide between the Power Four and the Group of Five. There's never been a bigger divide between the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12. But when it comes to the national championship, everything is kind of bunching up and going in the opposite direction, especially now that, we no longer have COVID quarterbacks. We don't have any more 24-year-olds out there who have all that kind of experience that could just transfer into a place and keep the car rolling. I think that with all the changes at QB and all the changes across the board, there's a lot more that's, just kind of up for discussion still. We have to let it play out.
You really going to say that Clemson is not a national title contender?
Yeah, I don't think they are. I mean,
that is so
they lost 4 games last year, fellas.
Give it to Dabo and make sure that Chip and I are on the bus with Clemson, not the rest of y'all bus, which he can throw Tom on that one, and Tom could be the driver of this conversation. I mean, he's got.
Are they going to win every game 10-7?
Wait a second. You don't think their offense is going to be good with Cade Klubnik coming back?
Who's the best skill position player on Clemson right now?
Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, Antonio Williams, who was first team All ACC. Like, they have a deep wide receiving core. Running back would be the one question. They are converting a wide receiver to come over to play running back, that or a true freshman. But I think a lot of this goes back to the quarterback position, where Cade Klubnik was top 5 in touchdown passes last season. He played great against Texas, one of those SEC teams, was leading his team to a game, tying drive against South Carolina before he had that ball tipped and it went the other way. I think that is disrespectful to Clemson. Look at him taking shots.
How'd he do against Georgia again?
I
ain't bringing that game up. I'm not bringing that game up.
Yeah, for some reason you didn't mention that one. Yeah.
That felt like 5 years ago.
Listen, and we get to see it as the Clemson Tigers do start against LSU, a chance to rewrite all of the haunting nightmares that there were from that opener against Georgia, where they played so poorly. All right, now there is a new set of rankings out that I am very, very proud of. Danny, you'll be happy to know Clemson ranks a little higher in this set. This is the CBS Sports 136. That's right. We've got every single team and the FBS ranked. We're not cutting off at 25 because, frankly, 25 ain't appropriate. Now, you see Texas does get the number 1 spot, like in the coaches poll, but we've got Penn State ahead of the reigning champion Ohio State Buckeyes. As I mentioned, Clemson a few spots higher, number 4 in our rankings. Now, but as we start to expand our conversation, we talked about a lot of the teams in the top 10. Tom, I know that there's at least one team that maybe not only did not fall in line with where you had them on your ballot, but maybe surprised you. It was down there at number 12. So what'd you make when you saw the consensus at CBS Sports 136?
Yeah, they're not on that graphic of top 10 teams, so at least our voters weren't that dumb. But I saw Florida at number 12. And I need to know what our voters are smoking to put Florida at number 12, because I just want to remind everybody watching, I don't think the Gators are going to stink, but to start them at 12 is ridiculous. This is a team that hasn't finished any season ranked since 2020. They haven't won more than 8 games in a season since 2019. So for them to jump that high to be a number 12 team in the country to start the year, I will remind you, in the last 4 years, Florida is 2-11 against top 15 teams. Maybe I'm strange, but I think that if you're going to be considered a top 15 team, you actually have to show an ability to beat top 15 teams. And Florida hasn't done it for years. And listen, I like DJ Lagway. I get it. I know they were better when he was healthy and starting last year, but this is still a team that, for me, with all the other teams you could have voted for to put in that spot, I need to see Florida winning these games before I can just sit there and assume, oh, yeah, that's the 12th best team in the country.
Okay, I can get back on board with this one, Tom. We can high five on this take. And by the way, when was this poll taken? Was it taken in one of the like 2 days over the complete offseason where DJ Lagway was healthy? It must have been, because otherwise all you've seen him is missing the spring with a shoulder injury, limited throwing motion, then comes into camp with a sleeve on his strained calf. And I know he's back at practice, but I still think that to me is the biggest concern for the Florida Gators. Is I know they have a lot returning, and they've got an offensive line with a lot of experience, and they've got a defense which has a lot of guys returning from last year. But Tom makes a great point. They have not done it against the better competition last year. There was way too much faith, hope, and optimism around a quarterback who, yes, he's incredibly gifted and he's 6-1 as a starter when he's healthy. But until I see him play a string of 5-6 games consecutively, that is a major concern, especially since there's no Graham Mertz walking through the door. Harrison Bailey, their backup quarterback, hasn't even played that much in his entirety of his career. So I think there are major concerns, and I agree with you. It is way too much sort of a brand bias, but they do seem to be that trendy team this offseason that everybody's fallen in love with. And again, their win total's what, 7.5, which I think I'll be on the under based on recent history.
Yeah, the Gators 17 in the coaches poll, 12 in the CBS Sports 136. Some of the biggest movers from the end of last year's rankings, Oklahoma, Auburn, and Florida, all more than 20 spots higher in the preseason ranking than where they finished. And what's common? I don't know what they have in common. Maybe it's a conference affiliation. Okay, rankings side, let's talk about our big board. Let's talk about impact players. So coming up on the other side, Tom, Danny, and myself will be drafting our impact players for 2025 and more. Next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. We have a great opportunity here to be able to highlight positions other than the quarterback. No offense, Danny, but other positions need love too. And when we did our Heisman Trophy draft last week, it was a lot of quarterbacks. So what we are going to be doing with this week's draft, it is going to be looking for the impact players in college football. We left this a little bit loose so that your definition of impact might be different than another's. So we'll discuss that at the end. Right now, let's just get to picks. Danny Kanell, you are first on the clock in the Impact Players Draft, non-quarterback edition.
So let me think about this. It took a long time, a lot of research to see which direction I would go. Oh, there just happens to be one wide receiver who might eventually, not even this year, but be the first overall pick in the NFL draft because he's that good. One of the best freshman seasons we've seen in history, and including at a place they've had quite the few wide receivers become first-round picks. Give me Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. We got to see him when you passed him in the hallways out there in Las Vegas at Big Ten Media Days. You almost do a double take like, wait, that's him? Are you sure that's not a defensive end or somebody who's out there going to wreak havoc on the field? Oh, he wreaks havoc, but it just happens to be wreaking havoc against cornerbacks who just look like little children anytime he runs a route. I think this was the biggest slam dunk pick of the draft. I wasn't going to try to get cute with it and go outside the box. I think it's a huge reason why, there's questions at quarterback. There's questions about new offensive, new defensive coordinator, but they still have the most impactful player in the country on the offensive side of the ball. I think this was an easy slam dunk decision.
Had a fun conversation.
You're right about, I was just going to say, you're right about Jeremiah Smith because it's like, I knew how big he was, but then seeing him in person like that, it was really kind of jarring, especially considering he didn't have pads on at the time.
Yeah, I had a fun conversation with Ryan Wilson of With the First Pick. He said that Jeremiah Smith would have been the top wide receiver taken in the 2025 draft, also in the 2024 draft, the 2023 draft, the 2022 draft, the 2021 draft, and took it all the way back to Jamar Chase in terms of where Jeremiah Smith could have ranked going back in previous drafts. You're not in on that, Tom?
I don't know. I mean, one season so far. I feel like Jamar Chase was a safer bet at that point.
Fair. Body of work, indeed. Okay, Tom, you are on the clock. Number 2 pick in the first round, Jeremiah Smith, who, by the way, was selected in the Heisman Trophy draft. He was the only non-quarterback selected, so that makes sense. Tom, where are you going?
Yeah, and that was what was disgusting about your Heisman draft last week is that it was all quarterbacks and only one position player. Don't forget how close, or in fact, the quarterback didn't win last year. A wide receiver defensive back did. A wide receiver won a few years ago. The guy who finished second last year, Ashton Genty, was a running back. Wasn't even a quarterback in the top three, and yet you guys are just quarterback, 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 quarterback. Chip, you took Avery Johnson when my pick, Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame running back, was still on the board. That's who I'm taking. How are you going to take a Kansas State quarterback over the running back for Notre Dame, the guy who had 1,362 total yards on the ground in the air last year and 19 touchdowns, and did that not even as the full-time every down running back in the Irish offense? I expect he will have a bigger role this year. I think he is the most explosive running back in the country. He is going to be on one of the best teams in the country. And to me, he's the kind of guy, like, this is the Notre Dame team that reached the title game last year, and they did it without a passing game. If CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, whoever ends up winning that starting job, is able to bring a passing attack to that Irish offense, it's only going to open things up further for Jeremiah Love. I think he is going to have a monster season. He could lead the Fighting Irish back to a title game for the second consecutive season. So thanks for leaving him on the board for me, Danny.
Wow. So you would have taken him first. You feel that good about him?
Of course. He was number one on my board the whole time. Everybody in this draft was number one on my board.
All right. Okay. You had the best draft of anybody. I see how you're saying that.
That's right.
The only thing that mildly concerns me is we did see him banged up at the end of the year. I love that he played through it. I think he lost just a little bit. I also thought it was interesting to note Bruce Feldman put out his freaks list, the top 100 players in college football. There was a little note, if you guys noticed, at the very end, Jeremiah Love was not on there because he was having trouble getting some current numbers from Jeremiah Love because he's been, banged up and he didn't get to go through a lot of the testing that they usually go through. But I agree with you from the standpoint of impact on a team. Whatever quarterback is playing, you want to be physical. You want to run the football to take the load off of their shoulders. I saw some video of him the other day going through some drills. It looks like he's back to full speed. The schedule is pretty light. It's very manageable. So he could have one of those seasons where he's leading the entire country in rushing yards and could be absolutely off the charts again. So I like it from that perspective.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman might have a choice of whether we're trying to win Jeremiah Love the Heisman Trophy in early December or whether we're trying to have him as healthy as possible in early January. Either way, that is a player who has a direct impact on the college football playoff and the entire college football season. I can rock with that. I think those are on my board near the top, which means that I get the opportunity here at pick 3, the end of round 1, to take us to the defensive side of the ball, where I'm going to go with Caleb Downs. So not only do we have somebody who is one of the best sort of football players and has been for a long time, he steps up in big moments. We remember him playing, shooting the gap and pushing Texas to the edge in the semifinals. But also we've got the ability, if Ohio State chooses to use it, for him to play a huge factor in the punt return game, for him to continue to be someone who can make a play with the ball in his hands, with all that versatility, with all that high-end skill. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take our first defender in our impact player non-quarterback draft, and I'm going to go with Caleb Downs of Ohio State. Thoughts?
No argument there. I think he's the best defensive player in the country. You mentioned the special teams. Do you remember at this time last year, he was campaigning to get carries as a running back on the offensive side of the ball? Now they don't. Remember, we were like, where's he going to get the carries? Because they had Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Imagine if they get a little bit creative and put him over on that side of the ball. I don't think they want to lose him on the defensive side of the ball, but I agree with you. He deserves to be in this spot for sure.
Yeah, no qualms with the pick at all. He's very versatile on defense, too. So you mentioned like the punt returns, his ability on special teams. It's just also Matt Patricia, the new defensive coordinator at Ohio State, like Jim Knowles. You can move Downs around like a chess piece doing different things, and he's capable of doing it all.
We now get to round 2. We're snaking this thing. I get the first pick. I'm going to stay on the defensive side and take our first edge rusher. A difficult debate to try to figure out who you're going to grab. And maybe it is just these orange tinted glasses, Tom. Maybe it is that ACC homerism, but I think that the best edge rusher in the country is playing for the Clemson Tigers, and his name's TJ Parker. He is somebody who took my breath away, in the, oh my God, when I first saw him as a freshman 2 years ago, the type of speed, the closing speed of a predatory cat, the ability to disrupt an opposing quarterback, disrupt an opposing offense, offense. Parker is somebody who I think is going to have a phenomenal season. And when we talk about impact, not only are you having an impact on that game, but when you are a defensive star for a team that's playing to not just be ACC good, but really climb back to where Clemson was from 2015 to 2020, which is having a chip at the table for the national championship, that's when I think you're going to have an impact. And it's going to start going up against Garrett Nussmeier, who is my Heisman Trophy pick, in week 1 in Death Valley. So give me TJ Parker, the edge rusher from Clemson, as my first pick of the second round.
It's a good pick. It's a good pick. I mean, he really did beat up on teams like Boston College and Wake Forest. So, I mean, I think that's excellent for you to take him. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to be hating on Clemson the entire show. I think Parker's a very good choice, but I will argue now that I am on the clock, Chip, that you didn't even draft the best edge rusher in the state of South Carolina, because I am taking the top edge rusher on my board. I'm heading down the road a little bit. We're going to South Carolina, the Gamecocks. Give me Dylan Stewart. This is somebody who had 6.5 sacks last year, 10.5 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles. The numbers were there, but he did that as a freshman. He's a sophomore now. He's had an extra summer in the weight room. I think he is going to explode this season, and not just like the shotgun he was pantomiming on the field after one of his sacks early in the season. I think this is one of the best players in the country, and I think South Carolina is a team that nearly made the playoff last year. We talk about them as a possible playoff contender this year, and Lenora Sellers, their quarterback, is getting a ton of attention for the way that he played last season. But the biggest question mark about this South Carolina team is on the defensive side of the ball, where they did lose a lot of key players, but they still have Dylan Stewart, and I think he's the kind of talent that could keep them at that level on his own.
Love it. I think it's a solid pick. The only thing, and I don't want to make too big a case against it because I have somebody coming up that has the same issue, but Kyle Kennard not there on the other side anymore. You get a little bit more attention. He's been spectacular when he's had that opportunity. The big question is, can he step in that shoes as the premier pass rusher on that team? I think he can, but I want to see it first. That's the only drawback, I think.
All right, so Danny, you just teased it. Where are you going to go with this second round?
So I'm going to go a little bit of history and tradition here and kind of follow the steps of history, because Penn State has had unbelievable pass rush success coming off the edge, where this goes, and you can even go way back, but just the last few years, Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter last year. This year, I think it's Denai Dennis Sutton's turn to take a shot at that title of premier pass rusher for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Had 8.5 sacks last year. I also love the fact that they've got a little new action there with Jim Knowles coming over to take over that defense. Could get a little bit more exotic, give him some more potential one-on-one looks coming off the edge. So I think he's one of those guys. And if Penn State wants to take that next step and punch through and get that elusive national title, we focus so much on the offensive side of the ball and the lack of receivers, and Drew Aller has to take that next step forward. The defense has to continue to be as dominant they've been in years past. I think they will be, and if they are, it's because Denai Dennis Sutton will be as good as people think he can be.
Yeah, they lose Abdul Carter, but you still look at that defensive line, and they still have some very good players up front. Denai Dennis Sutton is one of them. They're going to be fine. They will be one of the best defenses in the country yet again.
Everybody took an edge rusher in round 2. That's because we couldn't afford to not have an edge rusher in 2025 on our impact list, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the most impactful positions. It's why we continue to see it even at the next level with the way that those players are being compensated, and also at the college level as well. Let's recap rounds 1 and 2 of our Impact Players Draft non-quarterback edition. Danny Kanell goes with Jeremiah Smith at number 1 overall. Jeremiah Love to Tom Fornelli at 2. I get Caleb Downs at 3. Cycle back on the snake draft with TJ Parker at 4. And that kick starts a run of those edge rushers. South Carolina's Dylan Stewart to Tom Fornelli at 5, and then Denai Dennis Sutton to Danny Kanell at 6. So coming up on the other side, we continue 2 more rounds on our Impact Players Draft. Danny Kanell is on the clock. We'll find out where he goes and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, rocking and rolling as we continue with our Impact Players Draft non-quarterback addition. Again, we're going 4 rounds. You're trying to get impact players at all of the other 21 positions on the field. 2 rounds in the book. Round 3 starts with Danny Kanell. You are on the clock.
I'm going to take you guys for a walk down memory lane. Early this offseason, in the spring, we had a mailbag question. Somebody said, who's the best running back from the group of 5? And we all kind of were like Mekhi Hughes at Tulane. But then we realized, oh, wait, he's not at Tulane anymore. He's at Oregon, that's where I'm going to go with my impact player who has had phenomenal. Not only last year was he great for Tulane, but the last 2 seasons, he's been over 1,200 yards. He's been extremely productive, extremely durable. And the reason I'm going with him is because Oregon, for the first time with Dan Lanning, they don't have the luxury of having a 24-year-old at quarterback where there's a wealth of experience and they can just trust it in a highly quarterback-driven system to chuck it and dink it and dunk it to replace that run game. I think they're going to want to take the load off of Dante Moore, Austin Novosad's shoulders, whoever's starting week 1 for the Oregon Ducks. And I think they're going to try to run the ball and be a little bit more physical than they have been the last few years. We know they brought in Isaiah Worlds, the number 1 prize possession at tackle for the Oregon Ducks in the transfer portal. So I think Mekhi Hughes is one of those players could have a massive impact for last year's Big Ten champion.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Big Ten defenses who wish Mekhi Hughes was still at Tulane. So maybe we were just, we were empathizing with them during that show.
Yeah, Jordan James gone, Noah Whittington gone. No shortage of production there. He will certainly have an impact. All right, Tom, you're on the clock. Where are you going to go in the 3rd round of the Impact Players Draft?
I can't believe this guy's still on the board in all genuine, answers here. Give me Ryan Williams. Jeremiah Smith was the first pick of the draft, and for good reasons. He's a great wide receiver, but Ryan Williams was the other freshman phenom at receiver last season, and I know he slowed down a bit over the second half because, to be fair, he doesn't have quite the build as Jeremiah Smith, as you can see in these photos. He's a little skinnier. He's more Devontae Smith-ish. But he is a big-time impact player. Even after slowing down, he still led the Crimson Tide in receiving last year. He finished with 865 yards and 8 touchdowns through the air. And he also added a couple of touchdowns on the ground rushing for him, and he spent some time returning punts. So he did a little bit of everything for the Tide, and I think coming into the second season where, while we don't know for sure who the starting quarterback will be at Alabama, I do think we'll see a little bit more consistency in the passing game, and Ryan Williams will have a big part to do with that. I think he's going to have a monster blow-up season. I think it's one of the reasons why Alabama is kind of being slept on a little bit by a lot of the country.
I must say, when you took him, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that guy, how good he could be. Now, I wanted to make sure we spread around the love a little bit, some different positions. I want to make sure I had a running back on the board after already having a wide receiver with the 1st overall pick in Jeremiah Smith. But I agree with you. I think he absolutely has to be on this draft and probably a pretty good value pick for you where you did end up getting him.
Well, I knew I had Ryan Williams there. You snatched him from under me, but I didn't have to go far. In fact, I just had to walk maybe about 5 yards in towards the middle of the field where I was able to find the absolute just dominator at the trenches in offensive tackle, Caden Proctor. You mentioned Bruce Feldman's Freaks List, always a great read to be able to get set on just like what we have in college football in terms of physical ability. And Caden Proctor, what he can squat, what he can lift. I mean, he has been a starter since he showed up as a true freshman, but this is where impact and the definition of it really comes into play for me. If Caden Proctor plays to his ceiling, he is the best tackle in all of college football. And that Alabama offense has just, in addition to Parker Brailsford at center, in addition to the rest of the line, like they've just got some real dudes that can be able to maybe be one of the best offensive lines in the country. However, Caden Proctor has not always played to that ceiling. So the impact could be preventing Alabama from getting there. Choose me as an optimist. Choose me as somebody who thinks that Caden Proctor can just shore up those technical things, match them with the physical prowess, and be able to be the best tackle in football this year. Tom, I like what you just said. Alabama flying sneakily below the radar. If Caden Proctor, if Ryan Williams, if the quarterback position, I mean, this is a group that can accomplish everything that it did when they were still head coached by Nick Saban.
Yeah, although you did forget to mention that Caden Proctor is a former Hawkeye. Let us not forget that long time that he spent in Iowa City with Kirk Ferentz and the boys. But the only reason I did not have Proctor on my board is that for impactful, and this hurts me to say it, it's just offensive tackle, as important as it is, I don't know how quote unquote impactful it is unless they get injured. I think that's when you genuinely see the impact of an offensive lineman. But as far as offensive tackles in 2025 are considered, yeah, Proctor's at the top of the list. He will be somebody that's going to be atop many NFL draft boards.
You said something too that I agree with you. Feeling like Alabama, people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit, in large part because some of these bodies that you're seeing, not only offensive side of the ball, but the defense too. And Ryan Williams on the outside, along with Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton comes in the transfer portal. Like there are a ton of weapons. If they can just get the quarterback play figured out, and I don't think you have to have a year like they've had with Mac Jones or Tua when they're leading the country in touchdown passes and yardage, but if they can just get some more consistency out of the pass game, a little bit more of a traditional run game, that's what I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be looking for from either Ty Simpson or Keelan Russell. I think it'll be Ty Simpson, but they have a lot of weapons around them. They've got a defense that could be one of the best defenses in the SEC. But to me, it all comes down to that quarterback question mark that we'll get a look at early this season.
Yeah, they look great getting off the bus. They've got to be able to be better on the field. So that's something that we're looking for in terms of consistency. All right, I'm going to get things started here with round number 4, going with another edge rusher, going with Texas's Colin Simmons, somebody who you don't see in a lot of NFL draft conversations because like Jeremiah Smith, he ain't eligible yet. A true sophomore who really burst onto the scene last year. Now, I see him having another great year for Texas. He's an individual weapon that can come in and wreck an opposing offense's drive. He can take a second manageable and turn it into a third and long. Just the kind of player that, again, like I mentioned with TJ Parker, he pops off the tape. He catches your breath, and I think he's due for another big year here. When we talk about Texas's defense and its ability to have the Longhorns competing for a national championship, to me, Colin Simmons is a big part of that. Danny, I know we've gotten to see Texas a few times over the last couple of years. What do you make of me selecting him from the Longhorns defense?
Love it. I mean, if Texas, they are the team that's ranked number 1 in our top 136. If they're going to, achieve that, yes, a lot of the attention has been around Arch Manning, but a player like Colin Simmons, who showed so much potential and production as a true freshman, has to continue that. I do wonder if teams will try. He's a longer, lankier pass rusher. I do wonder if teams will try to run at him potentially. Good luck trying to do that. I think he'd be an absolute breakout star for Texas. And if they meet the expectations of what people think they could be this year, I think it'll be because he has a massive monster year again, just like he did last year.
All right, Tom, your next pick, round number 4. Who you add into your squad?
You did just steal Simmons from me. He had been higher than this player on my board, so I'm still a little stung by that. But I'm going to go with another edge rusher, and I'm going to ask you guys a question. Do you know why Florida State went 2-10 last year? Because they got the wrong Uiagalelei. I'm taking Mateo Uiagalelei, the edge rusher from the Oregon Ducks, who burst onto the scene unlike his brother did down in Tallahassee with 10.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and he even blocked a kick. He was a one-man wrecking crew for the Ducks, and they're going to need him to take another step forward because they're replacing a few guys along that defensive line, and I think he has the ability to do it. He had a sack in, I think, 9 of the 12 games that Oregon played in the regular season last year. So he was not somebody who was just piling them up against bad teams. He was showing up week in, week out, a disruptive force. You look at Dan Lanning, you look where he comes from at Georgia, you know that defense is going to be fantastic. You look at the defensive lineman he helped develop at Georgia and is now developing at Oregon. I have every reason in the world to believe that Mateo is going to be one of the most impactful defenders in the country this year.
Don't tell his dad that that's the reason Florida State was 2-10 last year. He doesn't like when that's said out loud. So I go back. I thought his breakout moment for me was the Ohio State game when I think Jordan Birch was out. They had a couple injuries on the defensive side of the ball. It was like, what is Oregon going to do? And he stepped up and was constantly get his name called, was around the football, was all over the field. That to me was sort of his breakout moment. And then he never looked back. I think he's showing up on a lot of first round draft boards, down the road. So I think think he's absolutely a physical presence that absolutely fits perfectly in what Dan Lanning wants to do on the defensive side of the ball.
Hey, Big Dave can still get a first-round pick. Don't worry. We can still get a first-round pick. All right, Danny, let's bring it home. Let's bring it home. Last pick of the Impact Player Draft, round number 4, pick number 3. Who are you bringing to the table?
So I'm going to go. So I might be partial because I like wide receivers. You got to find those guys that can catch the ball. And I'm going to go with somebody that was not on this team down the home stretch because he was missing. He got injured. But Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. If you look at the top receivers in the Big 12 last season, the Big 12 was led by Tedero McMillan and Travis Hunter, who, by the way, both playing in the NFL now. But right behind him was Jordan Tyson. Sam Levitt comes back. They're going to need some more offensive production without Cam Scatterbo. I think Jordan Tyson fills in that void in a big way. Last year, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. I think he improves on those numbers again. Could be one of the top wide receivers in the entire country.
Yeah, no, I love that pick to finish out the draft. You mentioned it, like with Scatterbo gone, I think Arizona State, plus you just saw the development as the season wore on with Levitt as a passer. So I do think we're going to see them using the passing game far more often this year than we did last year, even despite all the success they had on the ground. And I think Tyson is poised to have a very big year, and he's probably going to be all first team Big 12, and there's a very real chance that he'll end up on some All-American teams as well. I think that's a great pick.
Yep, great pick. All right, let's recap rounds 3 and 4 of the Impact Player Draft, non-quarterback edition. DK got us started. Mekhi Hughes out of Oregon, then back-to-back Bama as Tom takes Ryan Williams, the wide receiver. I get the offensive tackle, Caden Proctor. Starting off round 4, Colin Simmons, the edge rusher from Texas, true sophomore. Then Mateo Uiagalelei for Tom and Jordan Tyson for Danny. Well, coming up on the other side, there were players who we did not have enough room for, so we give you the next best on the big board. We grade the draft and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Let's take a look at the results of our Impact Player Draft. We went 4 rounds. Danny got things started. Jeremiah Smith, he added to his squad. Denied Dennis Sutton, edge rusher from Penn State. Mekhi Hughes, running back from Oregon. And the wide receiver from Arizona State, Jordan Tyson. Jeremiah Love was Tom's first pick at number 2. Added South Carolina's Dylan Stewart, Ryan Williams, a couple true sophomores right there. And then Mateo Uiagalelei there from Oregon at 11. At the turn, I selected Caleb Downs with my first pick. Followed it with Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker. Then Caden Proctor there at 9, Colin Simmons at 10, Caleb Downs, of course, for the Ohio State Buckeyes, the reigning national champions. Okay, so Tom, who else was still on the big board? If we were to go another round or two, where do you think your attention would be going for some of the most impactful non-quarterbacks in college football?
There were a couple names I had really high on my board that I considered, but I liked my other guys better. But Nick Singleton, Penn State running back, I think is obviously, this is a team that's starting the year number 3 in the coaches poll. They are a title favorite. He's a big reason why. Him coming back to Penn State when he could have left for the NFL. Another edge rusher that we didn't draft, who I think is going to have a huge impact on a team that's getting a lot of buzz this offseason because they've spent a lot of cash. David Bailey at Texas Tech. And then finally, a bit of a wild card. We think of Ohio State, we think of wide receivers. They have had, like working man, blue collar tight ends, talented guys, but they have not really had the Travis Kelce kind of tight end. They have a Travis Kelce kind of tight end this year in Max Clare, the transfer from Purdue. I am very interested in seeing what kind of impact he has on the Ohio State offense because he's going to open up things for a whole lot of different people.
Love those. I had a couple guys that I was looking at. Ruben Bain out of Miami was somebody that kept popping up, but I think that's more of those, like if it was breakout season, he's always been talked about as this potential superstar for the Miami Hurricanes as a pass rusher. The production just hasn't been there, been a little bit banged up, dealt with some injuries, so he hasn't been productive. But if he's healthy, I think he could be one of those super impactful players for the Miami Hurricanes. And then the other one was Chip went with TJ Parker. I almost thought about taking Peter Woods, another defensive offensive lineman along that defensive side of the ball that Tom says I was just going to get run through by LSU and everybody else this season. But I didn't want to go too Clemson heavy on that one. So those were a couple of mine. Also, Antonio Williams was another receiver. I already had enough receiver. I didn't put him in that top 4 round conversation, but he's a stud for Clemson's wide receiving core that I thought about putting on there as well.
2 names that might be like, if I'm taking the word impact and getting too cute with it in terms of, if you take them out or if they don't play well, what's going to end up happening. How about the tackle for Carson Beck, who Francis Mauigoa is a terrific talent. But what if he doesn't play well? Or what if he gets injured? What if Carson Beck now all of a sudden is under duress? He already suffered the injury, but he also wasn't good when Georgia's offensive line took injuries. So in terms of impacts to everything for Miami, I think Francis Mauigoa was one that came to mind. And the other one, and this is definitely too cute, and the reason why I didn't put him there is because having him on the same board as Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams would be unfair. But the Oregon Ducks need Decorian Moore to be awesome. They need to have their star freshman wide receiver be ready to go because Dan Lanning talks about him, that he's had the right mentality, the right work ethic, but he does some stuff that surprises you. But with Evan Stewart out of the mix, there's a lot that needs to be picked up after losing Tez Johnson, losing Evan Stewart. Decorian Moore is one that could be impactful individually for Oregon. But guys, right, that's not nationally. That didn't feel like it was the same conversation.
I mean, we are taking Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams because of the impact that they had as freshman wide receivers last year. So I think you were correct not to include Moore in your top 4. I don't think it's completely out of line at all that he could have a monster season for the Ducks. He is a very talented player, and Dan Lanning, like you said, seems to be pretty confident and was talking him up a little bit to us in Las Vegas.
If it was breakout star draft, I would probably have him at the top of the list. Like, that freshman conversation or somebody who hasn't broken out yet, I'd put him up there. Eric Singleton Jr., the other one I considered on there. Too much unknown at quarterback with Jackson Arnold at Auburn, but he's going to get great matchups aside from on the opposite side of Cameron Coleman. So I thought Eric Singleton deserved to be in this conversation, but just off this board.
Great shout. All right, well, coming up on the other side, we did it last week. We sent you on your way with the win total of the week for the Liberty Flames. This time, we'll be going to the Mountain West for our win total of the week. We'll let you know and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. A little bit of time to get you on your way with the win total of the week. We gave you the Liberty Flames as our team in the spotlight. Now we go to the Mountain West. Tom Fornelli, where should we have our attention?
Yeah, a lot of times with win totals, you got to look a little bit further down the board to find value because the big conferences are pretty much nailed on for the most part, but I didn't have a problem finding this one. Last year, I was on all of our platforms and our show telling you to get New Mexico over 1.5 because they'd hired Bronco Mendenhall, who is one of the best college football coaches in the country. Well, guess where he is now, ladies and gentlemen? He's at Utah State, whose win total is at 4.5. And if you look at the Mountain West as a whole, it's pretty much 2 different leagues. There's the top half of the league, and then there's the bottom half of the league, which is probably going to be very bad. Utah State is a team that you look at with being in that bottom half, but they have a tremendous coaching advantage over everybody else. Every Bronco Mendenhall team throughout the history of time has overperformed their talents because of Bronco Mendenhall and his coaching. And you look at this Aggies team and you look at that schedule, I'm telling you, you only need 5 wins. Do not be surprised at all if Utah State works its way to a bowl game, beating up on the bottom half of the Mountain West and maybe sneaking into that little top tier a little bit. So I think it's the best play on the board. And last I checked, it's at plus juice as well. So run. Do not wait. Go get it. Utah State over 4.5.
Maybe they get that first W right here on CBS Sports Network where they kick it off against UTEP to start the season. How about that?
Dub.
How about that?
Easy dub.
That's a company man. And that's how we wrap it up right here on CBS Sports Network. Be sure to join us on the Cover 3 podcast. We go live on youtube.com/Cover3 Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and we will continue to be right here on CBS Sports Network Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. We will continue win totals. We'll continue to count things down as we get ready for the season ahead. So make sure you scan the QR code and subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
I don't think Clemson is that bad.